The air was sharp and brittle, cutting through the thin layers of her coat. A hush had fallen over the town, as if it were holding its breath. Windows glimmered with frost, tracing delicate patterns in silver. She stepped outside, the ground cold and hard beneath her boots. The first flakes began to fall, light and fragile, drifting silently from the sky. Her breath formed clouds, each exhale visible in the freezing air. The trees shivered, branches trembling under the weight of the early snow. A strange stillness settled over the streets, heavier than the usual winter calm. She pulled her scarf tighter, feeling the chill creep into her bones. With each step, the snow deepened, soft and cold, muffling the familiar sounds of the neighborhood. A sudden gust of wind swept through the alley, carrying a sharp, bitter smell. She paused, sensing something off, a subtle shift in the air that made her skin prickle. The snowflakes began to swirl faster, catching in her hair, stinging her cheeks. Shadows formed in the dim light, shapes moving just at the edge of her vision. Her heartbeat quickened, a pulsing rhythm that echoed in her ears. She turned a corner, expecting the familiar quiet street. Instead, a figure stood in the middle of the road, blurred and pale beneath the snow. Its eyes glinted with an unnatural sheen, catching the faint light from the lamps. A sudden dread gripped her, cold and heavy, rooting her to the icy ground. The figure did not move, but the sense of being watched pressed closer, almost tangible. The snow fell thicker now, coating the figure, yet it remained clear, unyielding. A sound, faint at first, reached her ears, like whispering carried by the wind. It circled around her, indecipherable, but filled with intent and warning. The warmth of her body felt drained, replaced by a creeping numbness that spread from her feet upward. Every instinct screamed to run, yet her legs refused to obey, frozen in place. The snow continued to fall, heavier, obscuring the edges of reality. Her eyes darted, searching for an escape, for a glimpse of normalcy in the white world. The figure began to step forward, slow and deliberate, leaving no prints in the fresh snow. A sudden gust of wind slammed against her, carrying the icy whisper closer to her face. She felt her mind shiver, as if the cold was reaching inside, probing her very thoughts. The first snow of winter, once so pure and serene, had turned into something alien. The street she had known all her life now seemed unrecognizable, twisted and unfamiliar. Every shadow, every whisper, every snowflake felt purposeful, part of something beyond comprehension. The figure stopped a few steps away, its gaze fixed on her, unblinking and patient. A chill ran deeper than the cold, settling in her chest and tightening her lungs. She tried to speak, to call out, but the words froze on her tongue. The snow swirled faster, forming a vortex around the figure, amplifying its presence. Time felt stretched, each second dragging, heavy with dread. A strange pressure pressed down from above, making it hard to breathe. The quiet, serene moment of winter's first snow had dissolved into something unrelenting and ominous. The figure remained motionless, yet its presence pressed on her like the weight of the sky. Each snowflake that landed on her skin felt sharper, almost deliberate, slicing through the warmth she clung to. She tried to take a step backward, but the snow beneath her boots clung stubbornly, as if resisting her movement. Her fingers went numb, each breath forming clouds that mingled with the swirling flakes around her. The whispers returned, louder this time, twisting in her ears, unintelligible yet unmistakably urgent. A shadow moved behind the figure, larger and darker, yet shapeless. Stretching unnaturally in the glow of the street lamps. Her stomach tightened, a knot of pure panic, and she realized she could not see the familiar shapes of the houses any longer. Everything was altered, distorted by the snow, the wind, and the heavy silence that had become suffocating. She forced herself to focus, blinking rapidly, trying to pierce the white curtain that had enveloped the street. Every corner seemed alive, every tree a sentinel watching her, every lamppost bending inwards as though conspiring. The figure lifted a hand, slow and deliberate, and the air seemed to vibrate with it. Her heart pounded like a drum, echoing in her skull, and an icy sweat ran down her spine. A noise erupted from the snow around her feet, like cracking ice, or 1,000 tiny footsteps moving toward her. The whispering intensified, circling her head, pulling her thoughts apart, filling her mind with shapes she could not comprehend. A flash of movement caught her eye. Something darted between the trees, silent, yet impossibly fast. She tried to step backward again, but the snow shifted beneath her, forming uneven ridges that tripped her feet. The figure did not advance, yet the air around it throbbed with anticipation, heavy and alive. Her vision blurred from the cold, but the pale eyes of the figure remained fixed, cutting through the blizzard like twin knives. A low hum began, almost beneath her consciousness, vibrating in her chest and teeth, in sync with her racing heartbeat. The snow around her started forming patterns, swirling unnaturally, circling the figure as though obeying some invisible force. The whispering voices grew urgent, sharp, demanding, overlapping into a cacophony she could not escape. Every instinct screamed that she was alone, yet the street had multiplied itself in her mind, folding into endless alleys and shadowed corners. Her legs finally moved, dragging her through the snow, but each step brought her no closer to safety. The figure tilted its head, an unnatural motion that made her stomach turn, as if examining her fear itself. A sudden wind struck her from behind, knocking her forward, and she fell to her knees, snow filling her hair and gloves. Her hands clawed at the icy ground, leaving no prints, no marks of her existence, only cold white resistance. The hum grew louder, resonating in her bones, vibrating through her teeth, into her very skull. She raised her head and saw the figure had not moved, yet the snow around it rippled as if it had been alive, breathing. A shadow loomed behind the figure, taller, broader, something massive, something impossible to define. It exuded a weight, a presence so heavy that the snow beneath it bent and bowed, folding in impossible ways. Her chest tightened, suffocating under the oppressive silence that followed the storm of whispers. The figure slowly extended both hands, not toward her, but above her, and the snow responded, rising in a wall around it. She tried to scream, but her voice was swallowed by the howling wind and the unnatural hum vibrating through her. Her eyes caught movement in the corner of her vision, and she realized the shadows around the street were beginning to detach themselves, inching toward her with deliberate patience. The warmth she had felt, the faint comfort of her coat and scarf, had vanished entirely, leaving her exposed to the pure, biting cold. A single snowflake landed on her cheek, impossibly large, crystalline and sharp, burning like ice. The whispers coalesced into a chant, rhythmic and unyielding, pulling at her thoughts, bending her perception of reality. The figure remained still, yet the pressure it exerted was tangible, suffocating, weighing her down into the frozen ground. She could feel something in the snow beneath her, alive, moving, reaching upward toward her, cold fingers brushing her skin. Every instinct told her to move, to run, to escape, yet her body refused, anchored by an unseen force that grew stronger with every heartbeat. The wind shifted, and suddenly the world seemed upside down, snow swirling in impossible patterns above her head. The figure's pale eyes glimmered brighter, reflecting shapes she could not understand, images that burned into her mind. The shadows behind it began to stretch, twist, forming monstrous silhouettes that slithered across the street like liquid darkness. Her teeth chattered violently, not from cold alone, but from a terror that had entered her very soul. The snow, once delicate and serene, now fell with intent, striking her face, piling around her knees, whispering secrets that her mind could not bear. The hum became a roar, vibrating through the air and ground alike, disorienting, overwhelming. The figure raised its head, looking skyward, and the shadows responded, twisting and writhing in unison. The snow around her began to thicken, forming shapes, hands, faces, grasping at her coat, at her hair, at her arms. Her vision narrowed, the world condensing into a tunnel of white and shadow, cold and impossibly close. She realized she could not move forward or backward, trapped in the center of a growing storm that was alive, aware, and watching. The first snow of winter, once pure, had transformed into something sentient, something ancient, patient, and cruel. She felt the figure's gaze pierce her chest, reaching past her bones into her very essence. The shadows behind it wreathed like serpents, growing taller, denser, more tangible with every pulse of the wind. Her mind raced, desperate to escape, to understand, yet comprehension fled her like smoke in the storm. The snow continued to fall, heavier than ever, carrying with it a warning she could not articulate, a danger she could not outrun, a horror that had begun with the simple beauty of winter's first snow. She felt the weight of the snowstorm pressing on her chest, yet something inside her stirred, a fragile spark of resolve. The whispers faded slightly, retreating into the edges of the blizzard, leaving only the low hum that vibrated through her bones. Her gaze returned to the figure, and though its pale eyes still watched her, there was no immediate movement, no rush to consume or harm. The shadows behind it wavered, curling back into the whiteness of the swirling snow, as if respecting an invisible boundary. She took a careful step backward, then another, letting instinct guide her through the snow-covered street. Each breath burned her lungs, each step sank into cold and wet snow, yet she forced herself to keep moving, refusing to look away from the figure. The wind lessened, and the storm's grip seemed to loosen, though the chill remained, persistent and unyielding. Slowly, the snow that had formed shapes around her began to collapse into powder, melting into the ground beneath her boots. The street, though still blanketed in white, became recognizable again, houses, lampposts, and fences emerging from the veil of winter. The figure remained in the distance, silent, unthreatening, its eyes fixed on her as if acknowledging her courage or endurance. She did not run, she did not scream, she simply walked, steadying her racing heart, letting each step reaffirm her presence in the world she knew. The snowflakes, once violent and purposeful, returned to their gentle descent, drifting lazily onto rooftops and trees. She reached the corner of the street where the storm had begun to feel unbearable and paused, looking back. The figure was still there, and for a moment, a strange calm settled over her. It did not advance, did not retreat, merely existed as part of the winter night, as if it belonged to the first snow itself. The wind carried no more whispers, only the soft rustle of ice-laden branches and the quiet sigh of the earth beneath the snow. Her fear remained, lingering like a shadow in her chest, but it no longer ruled her thoughts. The first snow of winter had arrived, not as a gentle promise of the season, but as a test, a reminder of the fragile line between wonder and unease. She turned and walked home, the snow crunching softly beneath her boots. Each step left a print in the fresh powder, proof of her passage through the night, proof that she had endured the storm. Above, the pale moonlight reflected off the snow, casting silver shadows across the empty street. She felt a shiver, not entirely from cold, but from the memory of the figure's gaze, the intangible weight of the winter night. And though the town seemed quiet and peaceful once more, she knew that somewhere, in the drifting snow, a presence remained, watchful, patient, and eternal. She opened her door and stepped inside, closing it gently behind her. The warmth of the house enveloped her, the smell of fire and winter spices filling her senses. Yet as she looked out the window at the snow-covered street, she understood that the winter's first snow would never be just snow again. It carried a memory, a warning, a secret that only she had witnessed. And in the quiet of that night, as the snow continued to fall silently, she felt the line between fear and wonder blur, leaving her both uneasy and in awe of the world she had survived.